Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the Transfer Deal Sheet, our guide to the summer transfer market. David Ornstein will bring us the latest developments across the Premier League and beyond, and we'll take a deep dive on the market in Spain for you as well, including Barcelona's admiration for Liverpool's Luis Diaz, and after securing Kylian Mbappe, what's holding up Real Madrid's pursuit of Alphonso Davies? I'm Adam Leventhal. Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast. Well, the Athletic's leading transfer reporter, David Ornstein, is here to kick us off. Later on, we're going to be hearing from our La Liga correspondent, Dermot Corrigan. Let's have a look at some of the developments since last week's deal sheet. And there was a big focus on Benjamin Sesko. He was the one to watch on this second edition of the deal sheet. And now he's set to stay at RB Leipzig. Just tell us about that situation and maybe the knock-on effect for other clubs.
Yeah, I think we picked a good one to watch this week, didn't we, Adam? Because no sooner had our deal sheet gone out than news emerged of a situation involving that very player. So what we said in the deal sheet was that obviously there has been interest building in Benjamin Sesko from the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United. But there's also a very real possibility that he could stay at RB Leipzig and extend his time there. And indeed, from conversations I've had in recent days, that was explained to me as being the biggest threat to somebody like Arsenal, who are regarded by Chelsea and Manchester United as being the leading contender for Sesko because of their Champions League football, their recent status, the way they're shaping up under Mikel Arteta. Their style of football, their need for that position, etc. But staying at Leipzig was really starting to cause some consternation, I think. Not anything to go crazy about, because Arsenal, although they really liked him and had him very high on their list, as we explained last week, that doesn't mean that they don't have other options. And they would have been aware of the possibility of him staying. But that was a danger. And then what has since emerged is that a deal is set to be done for him to stay with his current club. At the time of recording, it is not fully there. It's in the process of being finalized. It's pretty much agreed, but it's not signed. The agreement, as I understand it, is for a one-year extension on improved terms that will reward his fantastic status at that club and across Europe, and for his country, Slovenia, as well. So he'll earn more from it. And many people will ask, what about the release clause? Because, of course, there was one this time around. It would have cost clubs in the region of 65 million euros to take him this summer. My information is that it's unlikely there will be a release clause in this new deal, at least not a formal mechanism, and that most probably it will be a gentleman's agreement on a sort of range that if offers come in at, then both parties will show respect to one another and the door will be open to him departing if it's the right time for both parties and the right project for Sesko. And therefore, for now, it is case closed, and those that were looking at him will have to go back to the drawing board and study alternative options.
And for those clubs that may well want to now study alternative options, what do you think Arsenal will do, for example? Is it a case of, no, we'll be patient, or we're going to move on to other targets? What's your take on it, do you think?
Yeah, what we need to establish, and I'm sure this will happen in the coming days and weeks, is whether clubs like Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea wanted that position filled specifically, and if it's not going to be Sesko, it will be somebody else, or he was a unique case and they were pursuing him personally, and that if he's not coming, do they pivot to focus their attentions on a different position, say midfield, and put more of your investment into that area? I don't know for certain. There will be other strikers that Arsenal are interested in, have been studying. You know, in previous months, we mentioned on Athletic Football Podcast and across the website and app, the likes of Victor Gyökeres or Evan Ferguson, Others have said Victor Osimhen, and I'm not necessarily bringing those back to the fore in any way. I don't have fresh information, and I don't want to mislead our audiences. Somebody like Joshua Zirkzee is one that the likes of Arsenal, Manchester United have on their radar. In the case of Arsenal, it would be really interesting to see if they do a different striker or say the midfield scenario I just explained. And the immediate word coming out of the Emirates Stadium is that, they've got three frontmen in Kai Havertz, who's really progressed in that role, Gabriel Jesus and Eddie Nketiah. Yes, there's been a lot of speculation about the possibility of Nketiah and maybe even Jesus leaving. But there are no hard and fast decisions at this point in time. And such developments as Sesko staying will give Arsenal food for thought on what to do. And those players as well, some maybe renewed thinking on what they want to do. If you look over to Manchester United, there'll be other options in the frame for them too, but without clarity yet on their managerial situation and their budget, I'm not sure if they're in a position to advance rapidly on things just yet. And then Chelsea, they will have been juggling different options, and they've been linked with multiple strikers. I never got the sense that they were at the front of the queue for Sesko. And, some of those names have come out publicly. Others will maybe be less well documented. But certainly it puts the cat amongst the pigeons in this early part of the summer. And let's not forget, the market isn't even quite open yet.
Yeah, indeed. And we're talking so much about it already. You're absolutely right. For those clubs, obviously, and for fans who want to watch Benjamin Sesko, they'll be able to sort of see all his qualities at the Euros. Obviously going to be taking on England in their group, Denmark and Serbia as well. And to run alongside the Euros, we obviously have the Athletics radar as well. And Sesko is one of the players that is featured in that all-encompassing document, your go-to scouting report for the Euros. There is also one that's going to be running for the Copa America as well. So check that one out. Let's switch to last week's one to watch, and that was Michael Olise. A development in recent days regarding him. What's his status check?
Yeah, it's quite interesting that I got the sense that it was going to be Olise developing more this week, maybe, than Sesko, even though we put Sesko in the deal sheet as the one to watch for this week because we'd done Olise last week. And the reason I got the sense that Olise may develop this week is because we're getting rumblings that, those interested clubs, so we're talking likes of Chelsea again for the second year in a row, Manchester City, Manchester United, Newcastle United, they're being given advice to go to Crystal Palace first and try to strike a deal. Now, some people may say, well, there's a release clause, so they can just pay it. And in these situations, normally you would just establish that the player wants to join and maybe even agree terms with them. I know it's not meant to be the way round, but with release clauses, and especially on the continent, it's just normal practice. And then you go to the club and notify them that you're activating the clause, as, for example, Arsenal did with Thomas Partey, or Chelsea did with Timo Werner. But Chelsea encountered problems last year with the complexity of the clause at Crystal Palace. He then signed a new contract to Olise. It included a clause again, but I don't think anyone wants to do this thing wrong. They want to go through the front door, talk it through Crystal Palace. And it seems that that's the preference of Olise. And then when a club has agreed a deal with Palace or activated the clause, if they do, then Olise will weigh up which of the clubs he would like to join. He'd put the options in front of him and make a decision. And so, that process, I think, is going to come relatively rapidly. And when it does, he'll decide do I take one of these or do I stay indeed at Crystal Palace? Look, it's inevitably going to be one of the big situations of this market. It certainly feels one of the most high profile ones because of the quality of the player and also the clubs that want him, the stature and their size and magnitude. So this is one, yeah, of course we'll be staying across.
Couple of other players I wanted to ask you about, and I think anyone that saw Joao Palhinha walking away from Bayern Munich during last season's transfer window will be happy on a human level that this move from Fulham to Bayern Munich seems to have been rekindled. Is it moving closer? Is it moving towards done deal territory?
The only concrete, well-sourced information that I have, Adam, is that Bayern Munich made an offer late last week. I think it was on Friday, worth in the region of 35 million euros to Fulham. I was led to believe they'll go a bit higher, maybe prepared to push to 45, something in that bracket. And the situation was ongoing. The discussion dialogue continues. There have since been reports, and I haven't corroborated these yet, that offer was rejected, and Fulham are looking for maybe even up to double what Bayern Munich have offered for such a key player. He is towards his late 20s, but still very impressive for club and country. And the sort of vibe around it all is that there are more clubs in for him. And so why should Fulham just do this deal for the sake of Bayern Munich? There have been some other reports suggesting Bayern Munich are the only club that Joao Palhinha wants. And so if that's the case, Bayern will lean on that to help guide what fee they're prepared to pay, and knowing that in their eyes, it might be a one-horse race. But of course, Fulham have him under contract, so they retain power in this situation. And it does feel like an exit is likely. Maybe there was some understanding when the Bayern deal collapsed last time round that it might happen this summer. And so it wouldn't surprise you if it does. But whoever's going to take him, and it does seem most probable that that's Bayern, need to hit the right point.
And just one final general point. It was excellent watching you breaking the news last week in terms of the England squad and who was going to be in and who was going to be out. Now that we're getting into the sort of eve of the Euros, and the tournament is going to be kicking off very, very shortly, do you expect that the market to go quiet for a bit, or is it going to gather pace, especially because of this June 30th deadline that we've spoken about as well in terms of PSR?
A bit of both. Inevitably, major tournaments bring a lull in the transfer market. One, because everybody's focused on them. And don't forget, it's not just the Euros, but the Copa America at the same time too, which takes a lot of Premier League existing or potential future players out of the equation for a period of time. Two, because it's very difficult to conduct negotiations involving the players during that period because they're in camp. Of course, they can answer their phone. They can probably meet people on days off, or whether the national team allows people to come into the camp for discussions. And it's not even impossible that medical tests can take place. Medical records can be obtained from clubs and from national associations. But equally, some national associations might put a stop to all of that, say no talks about your club future during this competition, no medicals taking place, no one coming into camp. And so it's just not as easy. And that's another reason for any lull. That said, there are lots of discussions going on at various clubs in the Premier League and beyond. Some players are not at the Euros or Copa America. Some players are, but you can still enter negotiations club to club and with their representatives. Often the player will have made clear what they want to do, what their conditions are, or trust their representatives to lead on this subject, and keep me updated as and when there are some developments. We don't know when that player will be free from the major tournament, when their country gets eliminated. Can we get everything in place and sort the rest out afterwards? And so, yeah, I do expect a quieter period coming up than the little flurry we've had now and the definite frenzy we're going to have post major tournaments. I think it's going to be really busy July and August. Uh, and the one fact you mentioned is that July 30th. Sorry, the one fact you mentioned is the June 30th. The one fact you mentioned is the June 30th cutoff for profitability and sustainability. Yeah, I can only go on the conversations I'm having with clubs and representatives, and it indicates that there will be a rush, a flurry of activity. There are clubs who need to sell, and that makes it a buyer's market. And that, I imagine, would be in the week leading up to it. But the wheels are in motion for a lot of these things. Talks are taking place. Yeah, we're not, with many of those situations, not quite at the point of execution yet, but we're not far off. And so, irrespective of the tournament, I am expecting business to continue, but it will definitely be busier afterwards, not only because the major tournaments are out of the way, but once that June 30th deadline has gone, which is being referred to these days as almost like the unofficial third transfer deadline day with summer and January. But there's more clarity and certainty for clubs over their finances, and it's the beginning of the news cycle. And so you can be a little bit more liberal with your spending, knowing that you can then sort of balance the book subsequently within the reporting period. So yeah, maybe it's a bit of a calm before an inevitable storm.
Brilliant. David, thank you very much. As always, you'll be able to continue reading all of David's breaking news on The Athletic. And of course, you'll be able to check in on the latest developments elsewhere with our team of reporters on the transfer blog. Right, let's head over to Spain now. Amid the news that Barcelona are interested in Liverpool's Luis Diaz, here's Pol Ballus with an update.
In terms of signings, there are two clear priorities: a new holding midfielder and a left winger. Let's start with the attacker, because here is where we bump into the name of Luis Diaz. As a sporting director, Deco has started to explore the market. Barcelona sources have been told that the Liverpool winger would be very willing to join the Catalan club. It's not that simple though, as usual with Barcelona. As much as Deco is a huge fan of Luis Diaz, for Barcelona to even entertain any chance to think about signing a new winger, they need to sell first, and preferably a player in that very same position. From the current squad, Rafinha is the one to be able to attract a bigger offer from clubs from abroad. And then there's a potential negotiation with Liverpool, which can be expected to be easy by any means for Barcelona. Apart from Luis Diaz, 22-year-old Nico Williams is another name monitored by Barcelona in that department. Then if we move into the holding midfield area, the name dropping had stopped for a while. Joshua Kimmich and Martin Zubimendi were, by a mile, Xavi's priorities in that position. But now with the Catalan manager gone and Hansi Flick coming in, the club seems to be less optimistic with bringing a big name into that role. Mikel Merino, who is nearing the end of his contract at Real Sociedad, has been reported as a potentially cheaper target. But the big question that many fans can ask themselves right now is if a big sale could ease the arrival of any of those signings. Well, it would, but Joan Laporta, as he revealed earlier last week in an interview, does not feel very tempted to sell a highly rated star. Ronald Araujo has been by far the biggest name to be in consideration for a sale. He's waiting to sign a new extension at the club, and Barca will need to make an effort to meet his demands. But President Laporta insisted that he doesn't want to sell the Uruguayan, so this is one saga to keep an eye on, because with the constrained situation that Barcelona are living in, it's not going to be easy for them to escape from a big sale.
Well, many thanks to Pol for that. Let's bring in our La Liga correspondent, Dermot Corrigan. Dermot, as we heard there from Pol, Barcelona are struggling, and you have to feel sorry for them a little bit in the wake of Mbappe moving to Real Madrid. Why are they lagging behind so much?
Hey Adam, that's a big question. Yeah, Barca have these financial problems for going back to the previous presidency of Bartomeu. Laporta came in, and his main big idea was the levers, the famous levers that we've heard over a couple of summers now. which involved basically borrowing for the future from the future to pay down current debts that they had, or to try and sign players like Lewandowski. They've kind of run out of levers, and some of the levers that they flipped in the past are coming back to hit them at the minute. So they need to raise about 100 million euros in order to put into last year's, the season just finished, a salary cap with La Liga before they can really think about investing this summer. So they have a lot of plans. They would like to improve the squad, as Paul said there, but how much room they have for maneuver in the market remains to be seen. They have been very creative over recent summers and have managed to get a good bit of business done. So we're speaking to a couple of people. When you speak to people around the squad who know the players, they all expect it to be a very long summer with a lot of to's and fro's, and we won't really know what Barca's squad looks like until probably the 31st of August around midnight.
We've spoken about this June 30th deadline, which is obviously applicable for all football clubs in terms of the financial years, the contracts that we have in football. So you're expecting them to have to do quite a lot of business before that point, and then they can maybe try and kick on beyond?
Well, as with lots of things with Barcelona's finances, it gets quite complicated. But the problem they have is that they did this big Barca Studios deal, which they were going to look for investors to come in, kind of sell a part of the club, the media part of the club, and use money that they raised from that to pay their players and to pay salaries and transfer dealings, basically. Some of that money never came through last summer that they were expecting to come through. So it's still kind of missing from last year's accounts. They may come up with some kind of way to fill that hole. There's talk of trying to renegotiate the deal with Nike, the kit deal, which would again involve taking some money from future seasons in order to fill last year, which may or may not be a good idea, but that's how they're rolling at the minute. Or they might come up with a new investor in Barca Studios. If neither of those two things come through, then they do what most football clubs do when they need to raise money, which is sell some of the marketable players that are in their squad. Who exactly that would be and who might come in to buy them is difficult. Rafinha is one who may be up for sale. Araujo, there was a lot of talk that they could move him out. Every summer they would like to have sold Frankie de Jong because of the money that he's on and the money they could raise from. He's injured at the minute, just out of the Dutch squad for the Euros, which is a blow for him, for the Dutch, and also for Barca. So yeah, there's a lot of balls in the air, and very interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks and then over the months of the window.
Obviously, you mentioned there about, trying to get in investment in terms of sponsorship or commercial deals and things like that. But it's very much sort of a hand-to-mouth sort of existence. How is this ever going to come to some sort of conclusion where Barcelona can have a bit of stability? Or is it just the structure at the club that will never allow it to happen?
Well, it's kind of like democracy. It's like the best way or the worst way of running a political system, apart from all the other ways, as somebody said in the past, I'm pretty sure. And that's at Barca. It's a good example of a club where they have elections every 4 years or so. The fans, the socios, the club members get to vote on who they want to be president, and they voted for Laporta, knowing that he is a charismatic character, a guy who likes to get deals done, who's maybe not the kind of guy who likes to balance the books or the household budget at the end of the week. He's more a guy for big bets that hope that, Laporta he's not a typical guy who wants to balance the books at the end of every week. He's a guy who likes to make big bets and hope that they come off. Worked the first time for him. They signed Ronaldinho. They suddenly went on this amazing run and won a couple of Champions Leagues, over a decade ago. This time the plan was to sign players like Lewandowski, hopefully to roll that forward into a virtuous circle, they would say, where winning team raises revenues off the pitch. They have the new camp now that's going to open up soon, and that's going to rival the Bernabeu, which is a huge money spinner for Madrid. So Barca can see a big shiny new stadium attracting lots of events, lots of fans to come to the Camp Nou, charging lots of money for merchandising. There's a certain logic to it, but it gets caught up in the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, which is not where Laporta is best at, and that keeps catching them up at the minute.
Let's talk about Real Madrid. Obviously, we've mentioned that Kylian Mbappe is now their player, finally. Do they need to sell this summer?
I don't think they need to sell this summer. They've been quite frugal, relatively speaking, Madrid in the transfer window in recent years. I know they spent a lot of money on Bellingham last season, but they've also been moving players on they've shifted a lot of the big earners off their wage bill from a couple of years ago, like Ronaldo and Bale and Ramos, Isco, Marcelo. A lot of guys have gone, and the newer guys are on lower salaries and have been signed for relatively lower fees. Again, this is Real Madrid, so everything is relative. They may want to sell some players, though. Florentino, if you look back at his past, there's often been a summer where they've brought in a big Galactico. They've moved somebody out. You know, looking back at people like when Di Maria went to United or Ozil to Arsenal, that was to balance guys coming in like Gareth Bale this summer. I think that Ozil was signed. And Rodrigo is the one that there's a good bit of talk about. Rodrigo himself seemed to be almost getting out ahead of it before the Champions League final when he spoke kind of about how Man City plays some nice football and about how, you know, he wasn't sure of his long-term future, how he would fit. And there are a lot of young, exciting forwards for Carlo Ancelotti next summer, where they all fit together with Mbappe and with Vinicius remains to be seen. But they don't need to sell it. It's more that if a big offer came along and maybe it suited all parties, they might take it.
And what's the situation with Alphonso Davies coming in from Bayern Munich?
Really interesting one, because Alphonso Davies is somebody who Madrid have, you know, targeted from a long way out. It fits with their policy of signing, you know, the best young international players, guys who are really good on the pitch and also who have commercial appeal off the pitch, and also have taken advantage of players whose contracts are running down, market opportunities, they call it in Madrid, where they can get an exciting young player at a decent price. The main kind of hitch, or a couple of main hitches with that plan, is that he didn't have a great season with Bayern last year. You know, didn't really shine, or we didn't see too much of him in the games against Madrid in the Champions League. And also that Ferland Mendy had his best season for Madrid. There's been a lot of doubts about Mendy ever since he signed. He was, you know, Zinedine Zidane really liked him, but has never, you know, didn't really settle in to be like the first choice left back at Madrid, the replacement for Marcelo. But he was really good over the past season. Defensively, he's very good. He's very athletic. He's quick. He's cut out some of the mistakes in his game, and he's improved going forward. So, you know, if you were to look at it, Mendy had a much better season than Davies had just had. So why would Madrid make a change in that position? Ancelotti, I think, would prefer Mendy. You know, balance in the team is going to be playing on the left wing as well. If it's Mbappe or Vinicius or whoever's playing ahead of them, they would like a more defensive option. Davies is a much more attacking option for there. But Mendy's out of contract in 12 months' time as well. He's 29 tomorrow, I think. So there's a decision to be made there. And as it's Real Madrid, it's not in the coach's hands what happens. There'll be a lot of different elements. Florentino Perez makes the final decisions, but it's another one to watch, and it could take a little while to resolve over the coming weeks and months.
And they've retained players as well, haven't they? In Joselu, Modric, Vazquez as well. Smart business, in particular with Modric. You know, the old head that just keeps on ticking along beautifully.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for a long time, we weren't sure what was going to happen with Toni Kroos. The possibility that he was going to hang up his boots was always there. And I think that has affected what happened with Modric, that they liked having him around. He's obviously still a decent player, a good guy to have to come off the bench and maybe to play some of the games, but his real worth is around the training ground. The example he sets for there's so many young, talented players at Madrid, and Modric is, you know, he's going to be 39 in September, but he's still very fit. He still does everything the right way. He's just a good guy to have around, a good presence, very close to Ancelotti. So, you know, keeping him on a lower wage than he was on last season makes a lot of sense. And other guys like Lucas Vazquez, to, you know, they know they're not going to play every game, but you can rely on them to set a good example for the younger players at training, to perform when they do come into the team. You know, Lucas didn't play every game, but then comes in, Clásico, scores a goal to beat Barcelona in the Clásico, sets up another couple of goals that day, and then steps back out of the team again and is not complaining. Nacho, the club captain, does seem to be, you know, if not complaining, at least wants to show his worth, kind of, or for the club to show what he means to them. He's the captain who lifted the La Liga title and the Champions League. He's out of contract. He hasn't agreed a new deal. So maybe he will stay. Maybe he just needs a little bit more encouragement to stay. He's gone with Spain now for the Euro, so it might take a little bit of a while for that to be resolved. But they're in a good place, Madrid. They have a lot of their planning done already this season, and then they can, from a position of strength, they can look at what makes sense to them over the market when it opens.
And just in general terms, obviously you mentioned that the Euros there. Is there any sort of deals pending that might become a distraction whilst Spain are at the Euros, or any other deals that we should be looking out for in any particular teams in La Liga?
Yeah, Nico Williams is the guy who's in the Spain squad that there's most buzz around. He's also in a pretty good position in that he renewed his contract at Athletic Bilbao during the season. His release clause is around 50 million. That stayed at 50 million within the new deals. Often, players sign a new contract and the release clause suddenly goes up to, well, at Barca, it can be 1 billion, which is a bit of a notional figure. But, sometimes they'll double the release clause, which make it much more difficult for the player to leave. In this case, it stayed at 50 million, which if he does have a good Euros, he's a really talented player. He's improved a lot over the last 12 months. He's always had the pace and the trick and the direct qualities, but his decision-making has got better. His ability in tight areas could still improve a little bit, but he's a guy who Villa have looked at, who Chelsea have looked at, who Barca, or maybe you would love to get, but might not be able to compete. But he's very happy in Bilbao from speaking to people who know him. His brother is at the club. They just won the Copa del Rey, first trophy in 40 years. So it's amazing scenes where they all went down the river Nervion through Bilbao city centre on a barge. It's a lifetime kind of experience for him, and they're going to play the Europa League next season. Europa League finals at San Mamés in Bilbao, which is going to be an objective for them. And he's got time on his side as well. He's still 21. So maybe he scores, a hat-trick to beat England in the final, and suddenly everyone in the Premier League, wants to have a look at him again, or wants to get him on board. But again, just like Madrid, they're in a decent position where they can, if nothing happens, they'll be happy enough, but there always is the opportunity for something that might happen, and then they can take it.
Brilliant, Dermot. Thank you very much indeed. Also, thanks to Pol and to David for their insight on this episode. Don't forget to review the podcast. Check out the deal sheet as well, which is available for you to read right now on The Athletic. Thank you very much for listening.
If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.